Good evening, everyone.
Kavod Tarav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Okay, so we're finishing off this chapter. We have one more here. So it says, "Ve'im mechetchan ba'afilu lechatichot dakot lo nishtanet birkatan." So he says like this, that if he cut them into small pieces, the blessing doesn't change. So we were talking about vegetables. Ukidaminan hane gargalide delifta. So he brings an example, some kind of a thing there, some kind of vegetable. And he says, "Beperek ketzad mevarchin." So says Beit Yosef, this is coming from again the same Gemara there in the Brachot. Katav Rav Hai Gargalide de Lifta. Right. So yeah, this is like some kind of a cut up vegetable. So the blessing remains the same. Okay, so right. So lifta, I just remembered what vegetable that is. That's turnips. Okay. So you have shredded turnips, right? So the blessing remains the same. That's what he's trying to say. Okay, great. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch, and we're done with this chapter. So it says over here in the Shulchan Aruch, "Ve'im sechatan eno mevarech al otan mashkin ela shakol." Right. So this is really from yesterday, the Shulchan Aruch. We didn't do this piece over here. So it says over here in Gimel Shulchan Aruch that if he um, squeezed any of these vegetables and made juice out of it, so the blessing will be shehakol. Right, as we said, same thing with the fruit juice. Right, shehakol. This is also shehakol. Right, and we did give yesterday an honorable mention, to the Chazon Ish, right? Who we saw that there's a source for what he says, which is that these fruit juices actually should be borei pi ha'etz if they have the taste of the fruit. And the same thing also would apply to the vegetables as well, borei pi ha'adama. But the custom is not like that, But it's an honorable mention. We give to the Chazon Ish is the right opinion. So as we said, right, what would be the practical application? That if somebody made my mistake, did borei pi ha'etz or borei pi ha'adama on these fruit juices and vegetable juices, so he wouldn't have to bless again, right? He fulfilled obligation with that. So there's no mistake there, really. Okay, that's pretty much the story there. So I guess we'll go on from here. So next chapter will be Reish Vav. Yeah, we're going rapidly here. We're progressing rapidly. Thank God. Okay. These halachot are really, really important, and very practical. So you can't get any more practical than this. Okay. Rishlav. Right. So now here we're discussing this chapter, mistakes that were made, with blessings. What happens when you make a mistake, so forth and so on. So we'll see where this takes us a little bit, but let's get started. So first thing we see here in the Torah is it says that Berach ala perot ha'ilan borei pi adama yatsa. So right, we touched on this a little bit before. If he blessed on the fruits of the tree, borei pi adama. So he did full obligation, right? Even though that's not the correct blessing. But b'diavad he fulls obligation. Ve'im berach al pri adama borei pi ha'etz ve'lo lo yatsa. So he says, but if he, on the other hand, if he blessed on the fruits of the ground, borei pi ha'etz, so there he didn't fulfill obligation. Why is that? Because it's not truthful what he's saying, right? There's no tree here. It's just coming out of the ground, So there's no way to. So you have to bless again if you did that. Right? Your original blessing will not fulfill your obligation there. Okay, great. So it says over here in the Bit Yosef, Mishum beper katzad mibarchin. All right, Mishnah. It's Mishnah over there, same place, right? Same Gemara. Mem Amud Aleph. Be'amina na'ala beGemara. We said regarding this in the Gemara. Sham man tana deikar ilana ar. So it says, right? Ask a question. Who is the Tana that says that the root of the tree is always the ground? In other words, after all, it comes from the ground. The tree also comes from the ground. So he says, Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, this rabbi says, Rab Yudah, this is Rab Yudah. The Tanan, it says in the Mishnah, Yavesh Hamayan, Niktzat Sailan, Mevi, Veno Kore. So he says, right, that if it's talking about a different topic, but he's trying to fit it into this discussion here of ours. So what is he saying? He's saying, let's say the wellspring, right, dried out, the spring, or the tree got cut down. So then what happens? He does bring it, but he doesn't read it. So we'll see what that means, right, in a second. Rabbi Yehuda says, Mevi v'koreh. So Rabbi Yehuda says he brings it and also he reads it as well. Katvat Tosot v'Rashba said these two rabbis said v'Rosh and also the Rosh. Telechak Rabbi Yehuda, halachas rak Rabbi Yehuda. Kivan the Sadam Lam Tana Kivatei. Why? Because the Tana paskin like him, right in the Stam Mishnah. Aval Rambam Chet Pasak. The Rambam paskins the Birach ala Perot Hailan Borei Pi Adama. If he blessed on the fruits of the tree, Borei Pi Adama lo yatsa. Oh, he says he didn't fulfill obligation. Ninesh Sover. So it seems like he holds the lo amru begemra de matnitin Rabbi Yudai that they didn't say the Mishnah's Rabbi Yehuda ela lenamdenu, rather just to teach us the matnitin yechidahi, that it's a single opinion. Velo kaim alam kivatan. We don't paskin like that. Okay, interesting. Rabbeinu Satan devarav keshar poskim. So he says, but the Torah on the other hand, right, paskin like the other poskim, with lo Rambam, not like the Rambam. So it seems like the Rambam here is in the minority here. Aha. Okay. Rashi Sham says Rashi there. Regarding that, what Ula said, that machloket birkotein shavot. So he says they're only arguing about a case where their blessing is equal, etc. But if they're not equal, so then, right, everybody agrees that their blessing will not, one blessing will not fulfill the other. Beshuv en kan machloket. So he says, really, there's no machloket here. Apal gav detran berach ala perot Thailand bore pi adama yatsa. Even though we learned, right, that if he blessed on the fruits of the tree, bore pi adama, he fulfills obligation. Hanemile bechad mina. That's talking about one type. B'ta'a uberech alea bore pi adama, and he made a mistake, and he blessed bore pi adama. About tzanon bezait. But when it comes to radishes and olives, uberach ala tzanon, and he blessed on the radishes. Lo niftar zayt. He didn't fulfill the obligation of the olives. Umi Rabbeinu Yono katav sham. But it says, however, Rabbeinu Yono says there, Danu dafka shebesha berach berei pi agdama lo nitkaven niftor berei pi ha'etz. That he's talking about a case where, at the time that he blessed berei pi adama, he wasn't intending to fulfill the obligation of berei pi ha'etz. But if he did have the intention to do that, et priya so the fruit of the tree, and sarich lachazor barach, you don't have to bless again. He says we don't pass like that, by the way. So I'll explain to you guys just to recap. Right, what is he saying there? He's saying that if you have two different types of fruit, right? So one is from the tree, one is from the ground. So you can't you can't fulfill your obligation with both items with one blessing. You can't do that. Even if you had the intention to do that, it still doesn't help you. Why? Because one comes from the ground, one comes from the tree. So you have to bless, a blessing, unique blessing for each one. So, that doesn't really work. But what does work is that, if you had something from the tree and you blessed on a ber piadama, that will work because, it does come from the ground after all. Okay, so we'll zero in on this a little bit more. Let's see, right? To get more specific about these things. Katab Shama Rashba, says the Rashba, She'im hayu lefanav etrog v'zait. So it says the Rashba like this. Let's say, for instance, he had in front of him etrog, right? And he had olive. So v'kadamu berech al etrog. So what happened? First, he blessed on the etrog. Even though he wasn't allowed to do that, right? To bring that one first. Like we said, like we're going to say, right? In 211. So you guys know why he's not allowed to do that? Why isn't he allowed to bless on the etrog before the olive? So the answer is the olive is one of the 7 species, So you have to put that one first. It has priority over the etrog, right? Even though the etrog is very pretty, but it's not one of the 7 species, after all. So that's the reason why.
Not edible either, is it?
I'm sorry?
Not really edible either.
Oh, wait a second. You're the one who's telling me this? But wait a second. Didn't you say that you made something with that?
The rinds, but I mean, you don't eat the etrog as a fruit.
Oh, I see. So what did you make from it?
I can make jelly from the rinds, and I can make infused vodka.
Oh, there you go. Right. So that's the thing, a lot of Jewish people, they make jam from etrog. Right? As you know, right?
It's not the
It's a
fruit,
big
it's the
thing.
rind that you use. That doesn't matter.
You're saying it's not the juice. It's not the pulp.
It's not, there's really no pulp in an etrog. I don't know if there like historically was one.
Okay. So let's get into the etymology here, right? The physiology of the of the etrog a little bit. Let's talk about that a little bit since we got into it. So the truth is, there's different types of etrogs. They come from different countries, and each one has unique properties somewhat, and unique also appearance as well. If you ever noticed, like the Israeli one doesn't look like the Moroccan one. They look different. And then there's the Yemenite one, right, which really looks different than all the others. So here's the thing. I've opened up a couple of these, in my lifetime, to see what's in there, you know what I mean? Peekaboo, right? So I'll tell you what it is. The Yemenite one doesn't have any juice. It's got no pulp there, nothing. It's all meat, they call that meat, right? In halacha, basar, whatever you want to call it, right? You call it pulp, right? I'm sorry, what was that you said? Pulp, right?
So I was talking about the rind, which is like the peel.
Right, right, right. But the peel is like there's different layers, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Right, but I would use like the yellow part on the outside because the white part that's inside that yellow part is very bitter.
I see, I see. Okay, right. So anyway, the point is, right, that I got you. Anyway, the point is, right, that people also make jam, from the pulp. Now, here's the thing, uh, that's what I've heard. Uh, Here's the thing: the Ammonite one doesn't have any pulp, but the other ones do. The more standard ones, they do have pulp inside. Even though it's not the same amount as a lemon, right? It's not as much, but it does have in there, some pulp. And also there's seeds in there, in the pulp as well. So it's like basically, it's a very how would you call it, right? It's an exotic type of citrus fruit. A little bit different than the others, but it's got the same properties basically, as like a lemon or an orange. It's the same family, but if you want to call it that, right? Whatever. It's just a different variation on the same theme. It does have some pulp. The skin is thicker with the etrog. You know that, right? All that stuff. So okay, fine. The thing is that etrogs. The truth is, they are edible even raw. Some people do eat them, even though today not many people do that. But it's possible to eat it. They're edible. You can even put it in your tea. For to substitute the lemon. If you want to do that. Okay, not exactly a very common thing today, but it's possible in theory. Okay, whatever. Anyway, the point is, right, that when you eat this stuff, as we said, right, since the olive is a seven species, so you should bless on the olive and not on the etrog. That's what you should do. We already did these halachot for Tu Bishvat, right? About a month ago, right? We less than a month ago, right? We got into that in the on the video. We went through that stuff. Okay, so that's the story there, right? So he made a mistake. He blessed on the etrog. But b'diavad, right? He fulfills the obligation anyway because he made borei priyatz, right? So, and they do apply to both of them. So therefore, that's all he needs. He's good. אין עוד צריך לחזור ולברך על הזית, כיוון דברכותיהן שוות. So he says you don't have to bless now on the olive because they're the same blessing. That's only if you have the intention, right, to fulfill the obligation for both of them. But if you didn't have the intention to fulfill the obligation for both of them, not so. So it says because it doesn't make sense, right, to say that he's going to absolve something which is not really, he's not really intending to do that. Shehu Chashuv. He's saying something else. He's saying, right, that the one which is not prominent is not going to automatically fulfill the one which is prominent, unless you have the intention to do so. That's what he's saying. Okay, interesting. Right, by way of by dint of this by dint of that. So it has to be that you intend to do that. ולפי פירוש זה, so it's according to this פירוש, אם היה אוכל תפוחים, so if he was eating apples, right? וברך עליהם, and he blessed on that, right? ואחר כך הביאו לפניו אגוזים. Then they brought nuts to him, right? אם התפוחים חביבים לו, so he says, now let's look at it this way, right? If he likes the apples, right? He likes apples. yoter, more than the nuts, poter, then it does absolve that, according to the principle that we just mentioned. It'll absolve the nuts because of the right by dint. Birkat tapuchim, the blessing of the apples. Aval im enam b'chavim, but he says if he doesn't really like the apples so much, enam potrim et egozim. So then it will not absolve the nuts. Ela im ken nitkaven lahem mitchila, unless he had intention to do so. Okay, great. So this was the Rashba here. Interesting. So this is the Rashba on the Talmud, right? It's not the Tshuva. Whatever, it's all good. Anyway, so let's go to Shulchan Aruch and see how he paskins here. So this was Aleph and Bet together. Okay. Aleph and Bet together. So says the Shulchan Aruch, Berach ala perot hailan borei pri adama. If he blessed on the fruits of the tree, borei pri adama, yatzah, he did fulfill his obligation, b'diavad, right? Aval im berach al pri adama, borei pri etz. But if he blessed on the fruit of the ground, borei pri etz, lo yatzah, he didn't fulfill his obligation. So that's what happens, right? Let's say you take, like papaya, and you bless on that borei pri etz. It's not going to go. You're going to have to bless again. This is one example. Hilkach im hu misupak mipri. So therefore, it says if he has a doubt whether it's etz or adama, this particular fruit, imu pri etz, if it's from the mavarech barei pri adama. So then he's going to, as you said, he's going to do adama, because that will cover it, b'diavad. The ala kol im amar shakol. Also, whatever he said shakol, yatsa, he did fulfill his obligation. Afilu al pat v'yain, even if it was bread or wine, right? Even that shakol will do the job. B'diavad. Okay, that's Aleph. Any questions over here? So I guess we'll go on. So it says in Bet, let's say he had two fruits, right? One from the tree, one from the ground. So he blessed and his intention was to fulfill, right? Also the other one, which is from the tree. So b'diavad, he did his obligation, right? Even though we saw that there's other opinions also regarding this, but this seems to be the halacha according to Shulchan Aruch, that he did his obligation, right? Which is sort of a chidush, surprise, whatever, but that's the halacha. Okay. There's a story, in Masechet Eruvin, about Rabbi Akiva there. So what happened was that the Romans, right, made like a prohibition, to study Torah. And the Rabbi Akiva happened to be right alive at that time. So then that's his business. You know what I mean? He's in the Torah business. So how's he going to live without that, right? So he kept on teaching, Torah. He didn't listen. He didn't obey. So what happened? They caught him, right? They arrested him. They put him in jail for teaching Torah. So what happened was, right, that one of his colleagues came to visit him, and so what happened was that, like, this incredible, right, incredible story that they didn't really give you much of a diet over there. In the jail, they basically give you bread and water. That's all they give you. It's not like today. They give you gourmet meals in the jail. Something like that, right? Okay. So, I remember when somebody, that we knew in Israel, he was put in jail. And so, they put him into this jail where, it's like a lot of religious people there. So, they have like a yeshiva there, Bet Midrash. You can go and study like there, in that jail. You can become like a rabbi, on the side. and what do you call it, study some Torah, whatever. And so the thing was, this rabbi, he was Sephardi. So they give you their, kosher meals in the jail, but so what happened was, right, that they gave him, the hechsher of badatz, which is like the Ashkenazi hechsher over there. There's many of them, but that's one of them, whatever. So so he was like complaining, he complained. He told him, "I want the Sephardi hechsher." So they gave him the Sephardi one, after he complained. He doesn't need Ashkenazi hechsher. So that's how jails are today, it's like a hotel, sort of not exactly, but compared to what it used to be in the old days, right? Not exactly the same thing. So, you get and there was also one rabbi I spoke to here, in America. I spoke to him in Israel, but he was American. So he was in the American jail system over here, he was in jail. I'm not going to get into the whole thing why he was there, but it's a different discussion. But anyway, right, what he told me was he says that, he says the religious inmates, he says in the jail, every Friday they take them to the mikveh, to go. I was like, oh, isn't that nice? You get to go to the mikvah every Friday, Erev Shabbat. That's quite a jail, What can I tell you? But anyway, right, Rabbi Akiva didn't have those luxury like amenities in his jail. They just gave him bread and water. That's all they gave you. You know? So what happens? Right, so Rabbi Akiva, being the Chassid that he was, man of God. So what does he do? He uh he takes the water instead of drinking it, he does netilat yadayim to eat the bread. So, his colleague was there, watching this. So he tells him, he says, Akiva, he says, what are you doing? He says, you're gonna die of thirst, if you keep doing this like this, using the water for netilat yadayim. What are you gonna drink for God's sakes? That's what he asked him. So this is what Rabbi Akiva answered him. Listen to this answer. He tells him, he says, what can I do? He says, my colleagues, the rabbis, they decree that we have to wash our hands before we eat bread. He says, I don't want to transgress their words, he says. He said, in other words, he basically told them, I'd rather die, than transgress the words of the rabbis. You understand? So why do I tell you guys this story, That shows you how much a person has to be careful about the words of the rabbis, to keep them. Rabbi Akiva was about, he was almost willing to give up his life for that. And that's why it says in the Gemara, two places, right? In the Masechet Brachot, Masechet Eruvin, it says there, "Ha'over al divrei sofrim chayav mita." The person transgresses the words of the rabbis, he's liable to death. That's what it says. What does it mean, liable to death? That means from heaven, not the Beit Din will not kill him, but from heaven he's liable to death. So he was very afraid of that, Rabbi Akiva. Can you imagine the kind of God, fear of God these people had? Okay, so just right, giving you so that why do I say that? Because here, right, we have some things from the rabbis, these things, so you have to keep these things, even though you don't understand them. Your intellect doesn't understand what's going on, but rely on them. You have a big tree to rely on, to lean on. Okay, so let's move on, right? Let's go to Gimel. Let's go to Gimel. So it says here the tour. כל אלו הברכות צריך שלא יפסיק בין ברכה לאכילה. So he says, all these blessings, right? You're not supposed to make an interruption between the blessing and the eating. So meaning what, like don't make a blessing and then just like, talk or something to somebody or, do something else, do some other activity. You got to eat right away when you bless. Don't make a pause or interruption. And that's an important thing to understand. We already spoke about that when we talked about the laws of Netilat Yadayim, right? We got into that. So here, the same thing applies here as well. Once you bless, put in your mouth. Taste it, right? Before you continue talking or whatever it is. Okay, so says the Bet Yosef regarding that. Ze pashut min da'aminan pek ketzad mevarchin. So it says it comes out from this Gemara ketzad mevarchin. Same thing in Brachot. The told Baruch o Gevil letore lo havev sek. So it says over there like this in the Gemara that if a person, right, made, let's say, hamotzi, right, and now he's got to taste the bread. Don't now talk about something else, But let's say, he did talk there, but what did he say? When he talked, he said, give some food to my animals. So why did he say that to give food to his animals before he ate the bread? You guys know what the reason is?
Because in the Gemara, somewhere over there says that you're supposed to feed your animals before you eat, no?
Exactly, right. It's a mitzvah to feed your animals first, right? So you see from there, by the way, that we're very gentle with animals. We're not supposed to, cause them harm or cause them suffering. Even animals, you're not allowed to make animals suffer. All the more so, people, you shouldn't make them suffer. All the more so. So, anyway, right. So whatever he said there, it was a mitzvah. Why? Because he wasn't able to take the bread until he feeds his fish in the aquarium, whatever, right? Whatever he's got there. So that's what he did. So therefore, b'diavad, he wasn't supposed to do this lechatchila, but b'diavad, since he said something which was a mitzvah, which was pertinent to the blessing of the bread, so therefore b'diavad he can get away with it. That's what we're saying. Lechatchila, you shouldn't do this, though. Obviously, there are other solutions you can do, but whatever. Anyway, that's the way it is, So he deduces from here, right here, that like this. Mashma de'im diber shar devarim. So that implies that if he spoke other things, which were not related, right, to that topic, they're not really in need for the seudah. So then he would have to bless again, because that would be an interruption. That's the thing. So you see from there, right, that you got to be careful about these things. Don't just open your mouth and start talking. When you made the blessing, hamotzi, you have to eat right away. Same thing with any other food. You gotta eat, you gotta taste it right away. Okay, great. So then, right, it says it too afterwards. The tzarich le'ashmiya le'oznav, ve'im lo yishmiya le'oznav, yatsa bidvad she'otzi b'sfatav. Also, he says another thing, which is that when you make a blessing, you have to make it loud enough that you can hear it yourself. So why do we care so much about that? Because first of all, right, we want people to say amen, when just your blessing. If you're going to make your blessing silently, you're stealing the blessing of other people to the mitzvah of saying amen. It's not good, you're taking away their mitzvah like that. So you got to do it out loud. Don't have to scream, but it should be the audible, right? What you're saying. What about b'diavad, right? So he says b'diavad he did his obligation as long as he moved his lips. In other words, he actually said something. Not just concentration or some kind of thought process. Actually, he moved his lips, right? So then b'diavad he fulfills obligation. But if he didn't even do that, just thought about it, that's not good enough. That's what we're saying. So says the Bet Yosef, Kabar Nidbar Basiman Kuf Pei. Says we already explained this in chapter 185 regarding the having to hear the blessing in order to move your lips and all that stuff. The Rambam also has an opinion about this, that even thinking about it sometimes can, fulfill your obligation. But we don't paskin like that, like the Rambam. Okay, so let's move on. V'neimarim bechol lashon, right? Also, it can be said in any language, right? That's why, you have these sidurim today, with English and Spanish and all this stuff. So, you can use that if you can't read Hebrew. You can use that stuff, to make blessings and all these things, right? All this stuff. Yeah, so says the Beit Yosef, Mishnah Pek Elu Demarim, right? It's in Sotah, this the source for this. Lamed Bet Amud Aleph. You can say blessings in any language. Okay, great. What else we got? So it says, "V'lo yivarech keshehu arum ad shichaseh erbato." Right. Okay. So yeah. So he's telling you here, right? One thing: don't make blessings when you're naked. Right? In other words, at least your private parts have to be covered. At least that much, right? The rest we can let it slide, but at least your private parts. You know what I mean? That's the thing. So okay, fine. So what is he saying over here? Bamed dvarim omerim, beish. That's talking about a man, right? But beisha, when it comes to a woman, you're shivat. So that's the thing. I think we mentioned this one time, if I remember correctly, that a woman has a different physiology, right?
Yes.
So the meaning what? That their private parts are like below. So when they sit down, it's covered. So therefore, if she sits down like that, even though she's like totally naked, she can make the blessing, since her private parts are covered by the fact that she's sitting. You know what I mean? But it's not going to work with a man, right? Because the private parts are positioned in the front. So they're sitting down is not going to do the job. Okay, so that's the same thing over here, right? As we mentioned one time. Okay, great. By the way, one time we had a discussion about this. One of these young rabbis over here, who doesn't know what he's talking about, in Queens over here. Right? He makes a lot of mistakes. So I used to. I don't know what he's doing now, but he's probably making trouble somewhere else. But anyway, before he was here in Rego Park, So one of the mistakes that he made was that he was saying, that a woman, who makes a blessing has to cover her hair, And I was like, what are you talking about? You see from here, right, that's very far from the truth, Right? From this halakha, you see that's not the case. A woman is not obligated to cover her hair when she makes a blessing. A man, yes, but yes, men are, but not women, so, it is what it is. Yeah, I just posted right the other day regarding single girls, that they're not obligated to cover their hair. And by the way, when you go to the yeshiva, for the girls, the younger girls, they pray there, with their hair uncovered. That's everybody prays like that. Nobody puts on a covering, to make blessings or to do prayers. Who does that in the yeshiva? Nobody does that. The Beit Yaakov, nobody does that. So this guy had some cobwebs in his head. Had to get those cobwebs out. And so whatever, it's all good because he was telling people, like a woman who's at home, what I mean, before she does a blessing, she has to cover her hair. Give me a break. What are you talking about? Where do you get this stuff from? Okay. So anyway, let's see the Beit Yosef, right? What does it say here? So perk mishemeto, right? It's in this perk, Chav Daled Amud Bet, Amud Aleph. I'm sorry. Okay, so yeah, that's also on brachot. Amar more, right? So this rabbi said, "Shnaim sheyeshanim b'mita, ze machazir panav b'korel kriyat shema, v'ha ika agavot." So right, there's another interesting halacha that it brings down there, which is, let's say you have two people, right, sleeping in one bed. Right. By the way, in those times, this was very common because they didn't really have like a lot of beds. Their resources were limited. In those days. So there was like multiple people on the one bed. This was very common in those days. Today, nobody wants you on their bed. Like they will, let me have my space. Like, get off my bed. Yeah, But anyway, what he's saying over here is that if they did sleep in one bed, right, two people, so now they need to say Kriyat Shema, right, before they go to sleep. They don't want to get up, right? They want to do it in bed, right? They want to do the bedtime Shema, right, in the bed. So what they can do, he says, is that each one turns his face right away from the other to the other side, and they can both read Kriyat Shema. So, what are we talking about here? Right? Obviously, from the context, you can see, right, that they're sleeping naked. These people, right? They're not wearing any pajamas or any underwear. Even they're naked. By the way, in those days, this was very common. People slept naked in those days, right? Whatever it is. So anyway, now Gemara asks a question on that, right? Which is, but yeah, what about the buttocks, right? The buttocks, like in other words, what he means to say is that they're rubbing up against each other, when they turn around, each one. So there's some buttocks, rubbing going on there. Isn't that gonna be a problem when you're saying Kriyat Shema? That's the question. And והאיכה אגבות, כלומר דנגי הדדה, מסייע לרב הונא דאמר אגבות אין בהם משום ערווה. So he says that, right, that supports Rav Huna. Why? Because Rav Huna used to say that, right, the buttocks is not really, called private parts for this, for these purposes. So meaning what? Even though the buttocks is exposed, it's not called private parts. Private parts is only the genitals. That's the thing. So therefore, it's not a problem. Okay, fine. What else we got? So it says, yeah. למה מסייע לרב הונא דאישה יושבת בקוצה חלתה ערומה. So right, let us say that this also supports Rav Huna, right? We just said this halacha, right? That a woman, if she's sitting right on the ground, she's totally naked, right? So she can remove the chala, from the dough and make a blessing. Because she can cover her, her private parts, as we said, right? Just by sitting down. But not the man. The man is different. Talk about Rav Nachman. Right? So it says Rav Nachman, Bar Yitzchak, כגון שהיו פניה תוחות בקרקע, right? So he says, right, so he explains, right, with the woman, as we said, right, that she's sitting, on the floor. So that means her private parts are covered. And therefore she can make a blessing like that, right? For the chala, to remove the chala. Okay, great. What else we got here? Peresh Rashi, v'kotza chalata aruma. Right? So Rashi explains, אף על פי שערום אסור לברך אישה יושבת מותר שבישיבתה פניה על מטה מכוסה בקרקע. So Rashi just, right, explains what we just said, right? So I'm not going to say it again. That's what it is. אבל לא האיש, but not the man, right? As we said, the man has a problem. מפני שהביצים בהגיד בולטים ונראים. So he says, because, his private parts are sticking out, basically. Right? It doesn't really help him like that. ואף על פי שמגולות אגבותיה, והיינו סייעתא. Right. So this applies when it comes to the woman, right? Even though her buttocks is exposed in that position. Nevertheless, she can still make the blessing, right? So you see from there that that's not really a problem. Okay, you can do this, just do me a favor, don't post it on Facebook, not a good idea. If you want to do something like this, keep it to yourself. Okay. People, I don't know what happened today, this generation that we live in, everything gets posted, on the internet, you know what I mean? Like, what did you have for breakfast, how did you make your eggs, sunny side or scrambled? You have to take a picture of it and show everybody, Why does the whole world have to see what you had for breakfast? I don't understand these things. I have no idea. I don't get it. I don't get this culture. I'm sorry. Okay. It's a very strange culture we live in today. They have to see everything, like I gotta show them. Hey, where were you? Did you take some pictures? Show us where you were. Show us what you did. Well, What is this? You have to show you the whole world how you live your life. You know? By the way, I hate to say it, but it's even worse for the women, because the women are supposed to be tsanua. They're supposed to be modest, you know what I mean? Modesty means you don't show yourself. You're not visible. That's the whole point of modesty. And today, just the opposite. The women are showing themselves everywhere, everything they do, everything they. Why does the whole world have to look at you, everything you do? It's ridiculous. It's the diametrical opposite of what Judaism was supposed to be. This kind of lifestyle. So, so crude. My God. Where have we come to? I can't tell you. I don't know what to say. Okay. Anyway, at, let's move on. We're almost done. I'm not going to take you guys too long. So, keep going. So it says, שהיו פני התכות, right? We said this already, בקרקע, דבוקות מחוץ לקרקע, ובאף אגב דרב הונא אמר והגבות אין בהם משום מרבה. So it says Beit Yosef like this, even though Rav Huna said, right, that the buttocks is not really considered to be erva, nakedness, לא קיים עלן כבתי, says we don't paskin like that. כמו שנתבר בסימן עין גימל, so like we explained in עין גימל in chapter 73, ואם כן נקטינן דמתרגם רב נחמן בר יצחק כגון שהיו פניה תוכות בקרקע, וכן כתב הרמב"ם, right? Milchot berachot. So in other words, what he's trying to say is like this, right? That the halacha is that she would have to be sitting in a way, where you can't see the buttocks either. She has to sit like that. If she can't do that, got a problem. Okay. V'da de lab davka arom. It says you should know that it's not only nakedness. Ela afilu liboro tarva. It says also if his heart sees the erva asur levarech. It's not allowed to bless. It says v'chen katav harosh beperek haroeh. The Rosh also says this, right? The Ita Yerushalmi says in Yerushalmi Arbikat Zikim regarding the blessing of the what do you call it, lightning, right? Rabbi Rimi Abai היה יושב בתוך מגדל של עצים, מהו שיעשה כמו מלבוש. So he says, it's all over there like this. If he was sitting right in a closet, right, or something which made out of wood, and what's the rule if can he mix like a clothing out of that to be able to show, and he's gonna stick out his head, protrude his head out of there, right out of the window, and bless like that. So it says if his heart sees the erva, right, which is the nakedness, right, the genitals, asur, it's forbidden. Or mutar, or is it forbidden or permitted? Ulamala pasaknu b'shasur ad kan. It says above we passed that it's asur, it's forbidden. V'hagaot maimon katvu b'perek milchot tefillah b'shum samak. So that's the thing, right? So with the woman, right, even that problem is avoided. Why? Because since her private parts are below, so the heart doesn't really see, right, the private parts. That's the thing. So a woman can get away with that, even with this rule. Okay. In theory, it works, right? Okay, whatever, right? והגרות בהמון כתוב בפרק מהלכות תפילה בשם הסמ"ק, וליבו רואה את הערווה בכל ברכות. So he says, this rabbi, right, that when we say, right, the heart sees the private parts, בכל הברכות אסור, it's all forbidden all blessings, ולא כרש"י, not like Rashi, פירש ברכות דמותר עד כאן. Rashi said it was allowed, but we don't pass like that. וגם דלא כהר"ן, also not like the Rani says, שכתב בפרק כמה דשבת, he wrote in the first parak of Shabbat, דווקא בתפילה. So the Ran says only when it comes to prayers. Dainu Shmona Esrei, Shmona Esrei, the 18 blessings, right? The Amidah, by Chagora. So then you need a belt. About Shar Brachot, but when it comes to other blessings, Lo Bainam Brachot, we don't need a belt. Katav Rabbeinu Yerucham, right? It says Rabbeinu Yerucham, Besov Nativ Set Zain, over there, Shasur Levarech B'Gilui Rosh. He says that you're not allowed to bless when your head is exposed, right? As we said. So that's, that really applies to men more, right? As we said. That's the custom nowadays. Okay, great. So let's see what we got here. Let's see Shulchan Aruch, right, and see what we got, what we glean out of this whole thing. Okay. So says Shulchan Aruch. Sorry, 1 second. Right, so like this. Berach al perot aylan. If he blessed on the fruit of the tree, borei pi adama, he blessed borei pi adama, yatsa, he did his obligation. About in berach al pri adama, borei pi ha'etz. But if he did the other way around, right? On the fruits of hadama, of the ground, he blessed ha'etz, he did not fulfill his obligation. Right, as we said. Because, it's not true what you're saying, right? When you say that comes from a tree. That doesn't come from a tree. So therefore it's a blessing in vain. Okay, so that's that. Hilkach im hu mesupak mipri. So therefore he has a doubt, right, regarding this fruit. What is the blessing? Im bar piyatz b'ri adama, whether it's ha'etz or adama, mevarech b'ri adama. You should do adama. Ve'alakol im yamar shakol, and also anything which you did said shakol, right? Afilu ala pat or yain, right? Yatsa, he fulfills obligation even on bread and wine. Okay. Yeah. Okay. You know what? We'll pick it up next time. I think I said the I didn't say the proper Shulchan Aruch here. So, but next next time we'll say the Shulchan Aruch and we'll connect everything up. We'll hook it up everything up. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with health and happiness. B'ezras Hashem. We'll see you tomorrow. Laila Tov. Chazak Baruch. We're coming to Rosh Chodesh Adar. B'ezras Hashem tomorrow night, I think. So, Chodesh Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All the best.
Kodesh Tov, Thank you so much.